So I know a lot of you guys are starting to get all your phantom parts now. I think there's about a couple hundred floating out there somewhere. I have quite a few to build myself, so I figured I'd record one of them and go through the process. I know there's instructions online, but then some of the steps I do a little bit different. The general process is still the same though, so I'll go over that. Okay, so let's go over all the parts real fast. This is a brand new keyboard. I'm basically going to use it just for the case to put all the phantom guts inside. This is the Philco and it's perfectly compatible. I know Cooler Master Quickfire also has a case that you can use. Those ones are a lot cheaper, but then you need to slightly modify the case for it to fit this phantom. I know a Plu keyboard is pretty much a clone of this Philco right here, so those fit pretty well too. There's also a couple other custom cases in development right now, but you're gonna have to wait until those finish. Okay, so this is the custom plate right here. There's a lot of different designs out there, but this one here is ANSI 150. Okay, it's stainless steel. Here's the main PCB right here. This is from the second batch. The first batch was about a year ago. It's almost identical. There's some slight differences, and I'll go with that in a minute. But for the most part, they're exactly the same PCBs. Okay, you're gonna need switches. I'm building this for somebody, and this is all the different switches he wants me to use to build it. Stabilizers. This is a Teensy right here. This is the main controller for the keyboard. Okay, 2 LEDs, 2 resistors for the LEDs, spacers, and a bunch of diodes for each individual switch. Alright, this is my personal phantom right here. I built it about a year ago, and I'll be using this to make references during the building process. Alright, so let me reposition the camera and then I'll go over the whole thing. So here's the new PCB. Let me just show you the difference between the old one really fast. Okay, I already took apart this case off camera. Okay, so basically here's the difference. In the old PCB, you can see that each switch has 4 little holes right here, and these are not actually needed. So in this new one here, they got rid of the holes. Okay, and also the font is bold. So it's a little bit thicker compared to the old one. See? So the new one has thicker font compared to the old one, and that's about it. Those are the only changes between the 2 batches. So functionally, they're the same. Alright, so let's get into the diodes right now. Now the diodes can be soldered on either side, on this side or this side right here. But I actually recommend it to do it from the bottom because here, these are the little diodes right here. And when you do it on the bottom, in case anything happens to the diode, like if it malfunctions or if it's a defective one, you can just clip it off right here and on this side, and then just solder in a new one. Now if you do it on the other side, like you're supposed to, you can see that the plate here gets in the way. So if anything happens, there's no way you can remove the diode. It'll be underneath the plate between this PCB. So you're gonna have to desolder everything and remove the plate to take it off. But then if you do it on the other side, like right here, just clip it off and solder in a new one. And it also looks nicer, I think. Okay. Okay, so let me show you how to prepare the diodes real fast. Alright, so you have your whole row of diodes right here. Just pull it off, each one. Okay, and what you want to do is just bend it 90 degrees. You kind of need the right distance so it fits in between the holes. And after you bend a few, I'm pretty sure you'll get the hang of how wide they have to be. And you have to insert it between these little the little through holes right here. Okay, so in the diode you can see that there's a little let me get something on a point. This right here, you can see that there's a little line, a black line on the bottom, and this goes into the square right here. So these diodes are polarized, and if you insert it the wrong way, like if you insert this square into the circle, then it's not going to work. The switch is not going to work at all. Okay, these little circle things are for the switch right here, and every switch there's going to be a circle and a square, and this is where the diodes go. Okay, here's another one. And you just go in like that. I actually have to mount this PCB up because it goes on the other side, and it hits the ground. So I actually have to prop this up a little bit. Let me do that right now. Okay, like I mentioned, you're gonna have to elevate the PCB so that the leads don't hit the ground while you're doing this. Put it between like a couple books or something, but for me, I happen to have some of these alligator clips. Okay, so elevate both of these sides right here and just leave the middle part right here with a space. Okay, again, so just pull it off like that and then just bend it. And then insert it in the little through holes. Okay, so I'm going to be doing all this right now. Oh yeah, just keep in mind that some of these are perpendicular and some of these are parallel, so they don't all go the same direction. See, these two are parallel. This is perpendicular right here. You're gonna be inserting this one, this one, this one, this one. All right. Now, if you're lazy and you want to be as efficient as possible, just bend them all at the same time, pull them all off, and then insert them all at the same time. So this is how I do it. Okay, put it on something and then carefully just bend the whole row. Okay, like that. But make sure when you're doing this, just do it careful, otherwise you're not going to get it bent to the right size and it'll be harder to fit. Okay, so let me do the whole thing right now. Okay, I bent the whole string at the same time, and this is what it looks like. So that was pretty quick and easy. Now just pull them off and stick them on the PCB. Okay, so all the diodes are inserted, and let me just get a close-up real fast. And again, you have to make sure you double check everything because I just found a mistake. Right here, I accidentally inserted the diodes into the resistor. R is the resistor A and B, and I actually have to put it in the diodes right here. So D corresponds to all the diodes. So I have to fix that. So make sure you double check everything is inserted in the right place. Make sure it doesn't go in the resistors or the LED spots. Okay, there's LED spots over here, right down here, and the diode for the caps lock is above it. Okay, and also make sure the orientation is correct. So the black band is towards the square because it's the negative side, and also not all of these are in the same orientation. So some of them are vertical and some of them are parallel, and you can see here that these are opposites. So one is on the bottom and one is on the top. So make sure you just double check everything to make sure you have it in the correct orientation, otherwise the switch isn't going to work. Okay, now I'm going to solder up the diodes, and I'll show you the different way that I do it. Okay, so the diodes are still loose right after I insert them, and instructions online says to just bend them like this so they stay in one place, they don't pop out, and then flip it over, solder it, and then clip the leads. But what I like to do is solder it on top first, and then so it stays in one place. So I'm not even going to bend it, because when I bend it, in case you have to desolder, it's harder to do, and it also doesn't look as nice. So what I normally do is just put a little bit of solder on the top. That way it stays in one place. Okay, so now I don't have to bend it, and I can just flip it over and then cut the leads. Okay, see, like this one, it still moves. So if I just add a little bit of solder, I won't have to bend the leads. Alright, so I'm going to do it for all of them right now. Let me reposition the camera because it's in my way. You don't even need to do both sides. Just one of the top side, as long as it holds it, and it's fine. So just double check that they all don't move. Okay, so now just flip it over, and then you're gonna cut all the leads. Oh, I forgot to mention that you really don't need a lot of solder on the top surface. Just a tiny bit so that it holds it in place, but you don't really need like a ton of solder. Okay, so here's what the bottom looks like. All this excess lead sticking out, just basically clip those. Right, this is an angle cutter, or it's called a flush cutter. But when I cut it, I'm just gonna leave a little bit sticking out so that there's a little tip of it that can hold on to the solder. So here's what it looks like after everything's been clipped. You can see just a tiny part of it sticking up. Okay, so now time to solder everything up. Here's the solder joint when it's finished. Okay, so now we can get onto the Teensy controller. Okay, so flip it around because this is the bottom side. And this is what the Teensy is going to look like right here. This is how you're going to get it. First, what you want to do is just pull off this foam. And then you're going to see that there's some black spacers right here, you need to pull this off because this is the spacer and it's gonna get in the way. When you mount it on like this, the spacer is gonna cause the Teensy to be too high, and this is not gonna be enough clearance for the case. So that's why you need to remove it. Okay, so to save time, I already did that with this one right here. And you can see that this batch of Teensy here, the pins come pre-soldered, but the first batch did not. These pins came separately, and then I had to solder it on. But these ones here looks like they pre-soldered the pins. However, it's not going to be enough. There's a couple pins that you still need to put on. For example, this pin right here, here, and here, it's missing from the Teensy. So there's no pin here, here, and here, which you're gonna have to put on. You can use the excess leads that you cut off from the diodes. These little guys right here. So just stick them through and then solder it on. Okay, but I actually have a bunch of extra of these little things. So these pins are a bit thicker, so this is what I'm gonna use. Okay, so just break them apart and then use these ones right here. Alright, so I'm going to mount it in, so then when I insert the pins, they're level. So they can be level and straight. Okay. Yeah, so when you take off this black spacer, this is what you're gonna get right here. It's just gonna come loose. Okay, so now you want to clip the pins. See, they're a bit long. So the reason why you want to clip it right here, I already did about 2, is because when you put it in, you want the Teensy as flush as possible. So you want it all the way down like this. Okay, and the reason why you want to do that is because you want it as flush as possible, because when you have future cases, you have enough clearance so it doesn't interfere with the case. So right here, this is the one that I pre-soldered already, and you can see that it's totally flush to the PCB. Okay. So even though you want the controller as flush as possible, you still want a separation between this PCB and this PCB. So I cut a little piece of electric tape, and you just want to insulate these little pads right here. Okay, so that's probably good enough. Okay, so now what you want to do is clip the extra pins off. And again, I already did 2 right here, and you basically just want about 1.5 to 2 millimeters sticking out, so it goes through the these holes right here, but you don't want them to go all the way through, and I'll show you why right now. Okay, so if I'm gonna flip it over, you can see that if it goes all the way through, these switches here, the 4 and the 5, if the pins stick through, you can't mount the switch. So if I'm gonna mount it like this. Actually, let me put the controller in first. Okay, so if these pins are not flush, you don't cut the extra off, you cannot mount these switches in. See, the pins get in the way. So this switch, I can mount it in. But the 4 and 5, the pins get in the way, and that's why when you want to solder it, you want these joints here as flush as possible. You can't have them sticking out like all these little joints right here. See, these stick up a little bit, but when you solder these ones, you want it as flush as possible. Okay, so let's clip the pins right now. After you clip a few of them, just stick it in the hole to make sure that you're cutting it the right size. Yeah, see the 4 that I already did? It's perfectly flat. There's nothing sticking out of the hole, and that's what you want. Alright, so I'm going to finish the rest of them right now. Here's what all my pins look like now. Okay, mount it on, and then I'm just gonna check to make sure none of them actually stick out of the hole. So you want to make sure they all go inside of the hole, but none of them actually stick out. Okay, so now we can solder it on. So what I'm soldering, just add a little bit of solder at a time. So you make sure you don't add too much. When you add too much and it starts coming out of the hole, then you have to use some kind of wick to suck up the solder again. I'm actually just gonna add a little bit of flux to help the solder flow better. Okay, see, when I'm adding a little bit at a time, right here you can see it going into the hole, and there's a little concave, and that's what I know, just add a tiny bit more. Okay, until it's perfectly flat. Alright, that should be good. Here's what it looks like. I might reflow some of them, but I don't think I need to. It looks fine from here. So you can see that it's perfectly flush compared to the ones right next to it, like this one, and this one that sticks up. These ones are all perfectly flush right here. Okay, so next. So this part's not really necessary, but I do it anyways. This is 99% isopropyl alcohol, and I'm spraying it just to get rid of all the extra flux. Okay, so just give it time to soak in a little bit. And then I'm basically just gonna clean it with a Q-tip right here, and then just finish it off with some Kim wipes. These don't leave any residue, and they're microfiber. Okay, so before I solder in the switches and install the plate, I just want to make sure the whole matrix is functional and has good connections. And I have this multimeter here to test for continuity. I guess if you don't have one of these multimeters, you can just skip this step. But since I have one, I'm just going to test it anyways. I'm just going to do a few. I'm not going to test every switch. Alright, that should be good enough. So before my computer can detect the keyboard, I have to flash the firmware. And the first time I'm plugging it in, it's going to flash like this. Okay, I'm not going to go through all the steps because flashing the firmware is more software based. And I'm just going through all the hardware stuff right now. So if you want to know how to flash it, just look for that online. Alright, so I'm going to flash it right now, so I'll be right back. Okay, so I've flashed the firmware. And once that's done, you can see the light doesn't blink anymore. Okay, so now I'm going to test all the diodes if they function properly and all the switches are okay before I solder it. So here's a little key tester right here on my laptop, and pretty much what I'm going to do is just short each key, and then if it actuates, then it should show up on here. Alright, so just take something metal and then short the two switch pins, or the two switch holes. And you can see every short I do, it'll show up on the screen right here. Now that I've verified that, now we can actually solder in the switches. And it's important to actually verify all this work because let's say you have a malfunctioning diode and you solder the plate on top right here. You can't really, it's going to be harder to desolder the diodes right here. You're going to have to clip it from the bottom, and you know, it's just more messy that way. So just test it first to make sure everything's fine. Now for the LEDs, and on this step you're going to have to choose which style you want. So here's the cooler master, and this is where you have the LEDs right on the corresponding caps. So you have the caps lock and the scroll lock, and then the other style you can install it's like the Philco style, where the LED is not actually inside the keycap, so it's separate from the keys. Alright, so depending on which style you want, the installation is going to be a little bit different. And let me go through that right now. Okay, so if you want it like the Cooler Master style, where the LEDs are right on the keycaps, it's going to be right here, the caps lock, and then the scroll lock right on top right here. But then if you want it like the Philco, it's going to be right here. You're going to install it right in the middle of these two rows right here. Okay, so first I'm gonna flip it over, and we have to do the diodes. So these diodes right here, or I mean the resistors. So these resistors, you can see has a green and blue and black band. These are 56 ohms resistors based on the band of the color. They come with, I think, white LEDs. So if you want to switch out the color, just make sure you match it with the proper resistor. Otherwise you're gonna either it's gonna be too dim or too bright. Okay, so just like the diodes, just bend it like this, and then the hole is gonna be right here. Right here where you see R, RA, and RB, those correspond to resistors. And these don't have polarity, so you can install it whichever way, it'll still work. Okay, that should be good enough. Okay, here they are right here. And keep in mind, I'm soldering this. It doesn't matter which side you solder it on, but I'm doing it on the bottom of the PCB. Okay, so now for the LEDs. So these LEDs here, they do have polarity, and it does matter which orientation you install it. The long side is the positive, the shorter side is the negative side. So you gotta make sure it matches with the holes. Okay, the positive side should be in the round hole, and the negative side should go into the square hole. Okay, so since I'm installing this in a Philco case, I'm going to be using these two LED spots, not the top. Okay, so these need spacers. You only use these spacers if you're using these two slots. If you're using the top one and the caps lock, you don't actually need this. It goes right through the switch. So since these are loose right now, I'm just going to put a little bit of solder so it sticks, doesn't move around. Now this way, I can still reflow. Make sure it's even and then straight. Okay, now I can just clip it and then solder it again. And LEDs are more sensitive than diodes and resistors, so you don't want to overheat them too much. Alright. Okay, now I can test if they actually work. So there you go. They work perfectly fine. So now I can solder in the switches. Okay, so now the switch and the plate. Just really quick, I noticed that these spacers rattled around. So you can kind of hear it rattling. And I just put a little piece of electric tape on the bottom, and that should prevent it from rattling around. Okay, so one on this side, and then one on the other side. Okay, that should do it. Now to prepare the plate if you have to. Not all of them will require this. So there were about 8 different plate designs to choose from, and they were cut from different sources. If you have one that came like this, it looks kind of bent. You have to unbend it first before you install a plate. So to do that, just push on the other side. Just push it in the opposite direction of the bend. Or you can put it on a table and just evenly bend it. If it's not perfectly straight, then the switches won't sit flush to the PCB, or it just completely bends the PCB. So that's not going to work. See, it's unbent for the most part, but then I have to just refine it a little bit. Okay, but most of the orders were for either an ANSI 150 or ANSI 125, and these ones are already straight, so they're ready to be installed. This one here is an ANSI 150, so I don't have to worry about the bending. Okay, so I can just skip this step for now. Now when you mount the switches on, you don't want to mount them all on at the same time. You just want to put them in key locations, and that way it just it holds up the plate, and then you can solder these few switches flush to the PCB. So I'm just going to do all the corners first, and then maybe a few in the middle. Okay, so when you put these on, make sure that you pay attention to which side is top and which side is bottom. So the switches has to go on top of the PCB and the plate. And maybe a few more in the middle. For now, avoid all the ones with stabilizers. So it's going to be these ones right here. You don't want to mount switches in these yet. Okay, so I only soldered in a few of them right here. Just pretty much the corner ones, a few on the sides, and then like 1 or 2 in the middle. So when you do this, it holds up the plate and the PCB, and then you make sure that everything is aligned properly. They're both parallel and flush. If you mount all the switches onto the plate first and then try to install everything on the PCB at the same time, if any of the pins don't line up, then you could bend it or it won't even go through all the way. So this is why I do this first before I install all the switches. Okay, so now for the stabilizers, And at this point, there's two types of stabilizers to choose from. You can choose between co-star ones like this. These are pre-assembled co-star stabilizers. They just mount like this right here. Well, you get the idea, but now you have to mount all the stabilizers first before soldering all the switch. Or for this build, I'm gonna use cherry stabilizers. These stabilizers holes right here, they're compatible with both different kinds. And if you're gonna use cherry ones, before you install it, I recommend clipping these little legs right here. It makes it feel a little bit more crisp, and also sometimes these little legs right here it makes the stabilizer stick a little bit, so that's why I just clip them off. Like that. So just do that to all 10 of these little stems. Okay, so I just assembled them all right here. Now, before I solder in all the switches, install the stabilizers first. And I also realized I messed up right here. I have to actually desolder this switch because I can't mount the spacebar stabilizers in. Okay, so for these co-star stabilizers, you can mount them in anytime, even after you solder in the switches, but remember, if you're using cherries like these, you have to install these first before you solder in all the switches. Alright, so actually let me desolder this right now. Okay, so I'm just going to install all of them right now. So here's a close-up of just how to install it. So there's a little bar right here. Just slide it between these two little notches right here and right here. and then push it in down this way until it catches the little grooves right here, and then just push it down and it should lock. Alright. Okay, so before I want to solder in the switches, just test to make sure that the stabilizers don't stick, because these are new and the plate is new also, so it might be kind of tight and sometimes it'll stick. So just soft mount the switch and then mount everything on. Alright, see, these are fine, so I can mount all the switches now. Okay, so since I'm building this for somebody, this is how he wants the switch layout. They're all going to be different colors. So the escape and the space bar is going to be MX black. Brown is for all the modifiers on the bottom and the large modifiers. The arrow cluster is MX blue. Clears is the top row. White is the numbers. Green, gray, and red is for everything else. Okay, and then he also wants an off-centered caps lock. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. So the caps lock, you can have a choice of having it off-centered or the correct way, the centered caps lock. So this plate and PCB supports both positions. All right. One more thing I forgot to address is that this PCB here, it only supports plate mounted MX switches. So right here, some of them I have PCB mounted, and the difference is this little pin right here, this little plastic pin. These actually won't mount into the PCB, so to convert it, all you have to do is just clip this little pin off. Most of them I'm using right now are plate mounted, but a few of these MX Browns, they're PCB mounted, so I'm just going to clip all of them before I install it. When you're inserting all the switches in, all the switches are in the same orientation except switches number 4 and 5 right here. You can see that these are upside down. So just keep that in mind. And then just have something elevating the PCB up so that the pins don't hit the ground. And then just mount them in. Okay, so here's what it looks like. Up here we have clear switches, MX whites, all these are red, clear, green, gray, clear, blue, black on the spacebar and the escape, and some brown and grayish right here. All right, now we can get to soldering. So flip it over and just inspect all the pins right here. All the switch pins, they're actually through the hole. Because sometimes when the pins are bent and then you push it down, it won't go through the hole and it bends the pins. Okay, so let me move the camera closer and then I'll get to soldering. Okay, so I'm just going to do a few of these up close. The soldering is just finished now. Here's what it looks like. And this is the main part of the Phantom right here, this PCB and plate combo. Okay, so all that's left to do is just install it inside the case. And again, this is a Philco. I'm basically just gonna use it just for the case. It's brand new, and I'm gonna void the warranty just to take it apart. Okay, so take it apart. These are all the same, just about every keyboard. There's gonna be 1 or 2 screws on the bottom, and then there's 4 tabs on the top, and then 4 tabs on the bottom. You're gonna have to pop off, and then the top part and then the bottom part will just come apart. Okay, so there's gonna be 2 screws right here and right here. Out right here and here. Okay, so all this stuff right here, we're not gonna use. I only need this case and this top part right here. Okay, so this USB cable is a mini B connection, so I'm just gonna have to find some kind of cable to fit in here before I put it all together. Okay, but this is how it's gonna look like right here when it's finished. Okay, so I'll have to look for a cable later on. But for now, I'll just keep it like this for now. Here's the custom Phantom fully built. It's inside of a Philco case right now. It looks like it does have a pretty unique combination of switches. And keep in mind that the plate does support removable switches. So if the guy wants, he can just swap all these switches out later. So if you want something like more uniform, just take off the top cover and swap out the stems. Like that. So now it's an MX blue switch. Okay, this keyboard is programmable, but then you do have to flash it with another firmware, but that shouldn't be too hard to do. So you can swap layouts or a custom remapped layout. Alright, so all that's needed now is a set of keycaps and a custom USB cable. And I think that's about it. So I hope that helped. And I'll see you guys next time.